Hi everyone, I haven't done a video commentary in a very long time, and I feel this fight is a good place to start doing video commentary again because it is quite a tricky fight. So this is the Lufenia battle for Chapter 3 Act 1 in the DFFOO global version of the game, and it's a fight against a pair of Medusas. And the strategy that I took going into the fight is a cheese strategy, and I picked a non-synergy team for this for the reason that if you skipped on Onion Knight or Gao, you can actually consider this strategy. It definitely is going to be easier if you use Onion Knight in the place of Ultimecia or Hope, but nevertheless, this video actually shows that you don't need Onion Knight in your main party. The strategy of the fight is to actually nail the bosses with Kefka's Shrine to inflict HP attack disable, and you'll see later in the video that it's a complete shutdown of the bosses. They had 0 actions the entire fight. It is a little bit tricky, it's not as straightforward as you might think. For one thing, the fight has extremely tight turn requirements, which is 80 turns, and it's going to be tough meeting the turn requirement with a full non-synergy team. On top of that, the bosses can actually cleanse themselves of all debuffs at the 79% and 49% HP threshold, which means that you have to keep a very close eye on their HP percentages and be prepared to re-inflict Shrine again when they hit those HP thresholds. Lastly, the bosses also will grant themselves a 150k shield at the 69 and 29% health, and it is going to be quite tricky to break through using a non-synergy team. However, as long as you inflict HP attack disable before they buff themselves with the shield, they won't actually cleanse themselves when they grant themselves the shield, so you can actually just take your own sweet time to break through the shield. Although the longer you take, obviously, then the more turns you need to complete the fight. So it is quite important to try to strategize around the shield. The party setup is pretty straightforward across the 3 units, so I use Ultimecia, Kefka, and Hope. All 3 are fully MLB. Ultimecia and Kefka do have their burst weapons equipped, however, the strategy that I took was a no burst strategy, so it is actually possible to complete the fight without either of the burst weapons. And of course, if you choose to use either Ultimecia or Kefka's burst, you will give yourself a much easier time, particularly Ultimecia's burst, because it can actually delete turns and give you a more breathing room. Beyond that, the core support is very important, and the most important core support here is actually Jack's core support, which I put on Hope. The idea is that when the bosses cleanse debuffs at the 49% HP threshold, you want to call Jack to inflict his frame debuff so that you will get a breath damage increase on all your attacks, which is actually quite noticeable if you look at the video later on. I placed a Ramza support on Ultimecia, and the idea is to use Ramza right at the start to do some nice damage before the bosses reach a full recast bar, and also to grant myself some of Ramza's buff. A better core unit if you have would be Onion Knight, definitely, or Gao. However, like I said, I wanted to try a non-synergy in my main party, so I went with Ramza instead. For this strategy though, you do need a Onion Knight friend support unit. And the main reason for this is mainly the tight DPS requirement. Using the Onion Knight friend unit will allow you to complete the fight without burst within 80 turns. And the Onion Knight friend unit also helps you to control the Lufenia orb on the last 49% health of the boss. So it is recommended if you want to try this strategy to find yourself a support Onion Knight unit with LD and BT equipped. So with that said, let's move on into the battle. I'll see you there. So for those interested in my party setup, this screenshot shows the artifact passives and spheres that I equip on my characters. And like I mentioned, it's important to set Onion Knight with Burst and LD as your friend support, and use Shiva as your summon. Do not use any other summon. Okay, so starting off in the fight, the reason why this strategy succeeds is that the bosses always start the fight with Flamethrower queued up, which is an HP attack. So meaning that if you HP attack disable them, they won't even get their first action off. With Kefka, if you have 2 Kefka actions before the bosses, such as this, it's important to use Light of Judgment before trying. And the reason for this is that this party has quite a number of debuffs, and if you use Light of Judgment after trying, you run the risk of overriding the HP attack disable, which you really don't want. Kefka's most important debuff by far is his HP attack disable, so that's why I use Light of Judgment first, and then follow this up by HP attack disable. With Ultimecia, I use Ramza's LD call right at the start, and I also play very aggressively with Ultimecia at the start. And the reason for this is when boss A, he starts off with a slight recast bar field, as you can see, but when he reaches a full recast bar, his eyes will start glowing pink, and when that happens, your bravery gains are reduced by a whopping 80%. Before then, the bravery gains are reduced by only 30%. So what this means is that if you play a bit more aggressively with Ultimecia at the start, you get more of a EXs, and this allows you to weave in additional turns and attacks before the bosses get their full recast bar, which is quite important in terms of DPS and turn order. So here I use Kefka's Hyperdrive, and with Kefka it's always very important that once you inflict HP attack disable that you enframe the debuffs before you do anything else with Kefka. Like I said, this party has quite a number of debuffs. As you can see, I already hit 6 debuffs, and later on in the fight I also want to use Jack Call as well, and that's why it's always important to use Trine and then frame it as soon as possible. Definitely do not use Light of Judgment on Kefka until his HP attack disable is enframed. The other reason why I play very aggressively with Ultimecia right at the start is when the bosses hit 79%, they will cleanse all debuffs, and the idea behind this strategy is to try to reach 79% as soon as possible so that I do not have to use too many of Kefka's Trine. With Hope, it's also very important to use his LD right on his first turn so that you can inflict Deshell on the bosses. Deshell is a very important debuff here because the entire party is magical DPS based, so having Deshell on the boss allows your entire party to hit for weakness damage. Okay, so when you are very near to 79%, such as this, you want to be very careful in terms of the turn order. because when the bosses cleanse their debuffs, they will not self-delay themselves. So if you find that they cleanse their debuffs and Kefka doesn't have a turn before them, that means you will not be able to re-inflict HP attack disable. Here I decide to go all out because on the turn order bar, you can see that Kefka actually has a turn right before the bosses. So bringing them down to 79% health here is optimal, so that I can re-inflict trying with Kefka. Once I hit 79% health, the boss will also have a full recast bar, so you can see the eyes are glowing on one of the Medusas, and this means that my bravery gains are reduced by 80%. At this point, I actually slow down on Ultimecia's DPS, and the reason for this is because I've already hit the 79% threshold, and the next threshold where the boss's cleanse debuffs is at 49%, which is very far, and you do need to save a little bit of Ultimecia skill users for the last 20% health of the fight, where you will be trying to burst down the bosses during summon. So here I go a bit slow and I weave in some HP attacks after I use her EX. So I changed her rotation here into EX, into the free skill use, into one of her S1, and then after that I just spam HP attack plus plus until her EX is fully charged again. So you notice here I go back into the same routine. I use trying with Kefka, and I immediately follow this up with Hyperdrive to enframe the HP attack disable, and this is before I even consider using Light of Judgment with Kefka. With Hope here, because the bosses have cleansed his Deshell, it's very important to immediately reapply Deshell with Hope the first moment you can. The debuff represents a significant DPS increase for your party. Okay, so when the bosses are very close to 69% health, you want to make sure that they have at least one turn of HP attack disable here. So I decided to re-inflict trying with Kefka, and the reason for this is that when they gain themselves the shield, as you can see here, although they do not cleanse debuffs when they shield themselves, they do gain immunity to new debuffs. So it's very important to ensure you hit them with HP attack disable before they cast shield on themselves. So at this point, when the shields are up, this is when I ramp up the attacks with Ultimecia again. So essentially from 79% to 69% I slowed down, but here I ramp up again, and the idea is to try to hit 49% as quickly as possible so that I reach the next threshold where they cleanse their debuffs. However, you do need to keep a very close eye on Ultimecia skill users, and you need to keep at least 3 to 4 of her Hell's Judgment, and maybe one of her LD for the last 20% of the fight. So do monitor her skill uses and try to pace yourself from the 69% to 49% health. It is a bit tricky to break through their first shields, but you can use attacks such as Kefka's EX and Hope's EX. They do still do some nice damage to the shield. You can also use Kefka's LD, although his LD is quite limited and I prefer to save it for enframing the HP attack disables. Okay, so I'm at 60%, so it's roughly another 10% more to go to the next phase of the fight. And since my Ultimecia has a lot of Protean Sword skill users left, I decided to just go all out with her and use her Protean Swords as a way to charge her EX meter again. Okay, so when it's very near 49% health, you do the same thing as the 79% health mark. First of all, if Kefka doesn't have a turn before, you actually want to slow down and ensure that Kefka always has a turn before you bring them down to 49% health so that he can re-inflict trying on the bosses. At very close to 49% health, you also don't want to bother refreshing HP attack disable because they will cleanse it off anyway. So here HP attack disable has worn off on Medusa B, but since they're very close to the threshold, I just decide to go all out and burst with Ultimecia to hit that threshold. Okay, so I've hit 49% health. Here it's very important to reapply debuffs. This is the last time the bosses cleanse debuffs. So first of all, of course you want to re-inflict Trine. If you have 2 turns with Kefka before the boss, you can use Light of Judgment before trying. But here I didn't want to take the risk. With Hope, it's also very important to use Jack Call. Another option if you want is to wait until Onion Knight has used his burst before bringing Jack out to the field. And that way Jack's call actually will do significantly more damage. However, here I decide to prioritize the debuff rather than the actual damage from the call. I do save Jack's Ninja Slice for the shield at 29% health. So I just use his LD call to inflict his frame debuff here. Now, before bringing Onion Knight into the field, you actually want to continue on your attack until the boss Lufenia Orb is roughly around 5 count or so. And the reason for this is that you want Onion Knight to help you refresh the buffs up to maximum count again. And you also want Onion Knight friend to help you break through the shields at 29% health. So the longer you can hold off bringing Onion Knight in, the better. So here the orb count is starting to get low and I bring in the Onion Knight friend. It's very important that on the first turn of Onion Knight friend support you use his AA to enchant the entire party with Ice Elemental, and then I immediately go into Onion Knight's burst. Now the combination of Deshell, Jack's debuff, as well as Onion Knight's burst effect will ensure your entire party cap out on Brave damage, as you can see. So take this opportunity to significantly damage down the boss. And as always, ensure that Kefka's HP attack disable is enframed. After using Onion Knight's burst, his last 3 turns should be spamming his LD 3 times in a row. And this will allow you to also turn manipulate Kefka as well as Hope before the boss's turn again. And it will also grant Kefka and Hope free turns. With Kefka, you want to try to optimize the free turns by using Trine if you need to reapply HP attack disable. And with Hope, you can use the free skill to use either Shell or Protect to charge his EX meter. If you have additional skill users with Hope here, you should also consider spamming Shell because his instant turn rate until you get his fully charged EX again. Because as you can see here, it caps out on HP damage and contributes significantly to the DPS at this stage of the fight. When one of the Medusas hit 29% health, they both will shield themselves again, but this time it's significantly easier to break through the shield because you do have Onion Knight burst effect in play, and if Onion Knight is still have his LD skill use, his LD will chew through the entire shield just by itself. So right here again, I just spam Shell with Hope until I get his EX fully charged. Because Onion Knight is about to leave the field and I want to take the opportunity to get one last resort in to get some sweet damage here. Okay, Ultimecia is back out here, and the bosses are down to their last 20%. Here it's also important to save your summon until the Lufenia orb starts to get low again. And the reason is very similar to Onion Knight. You want to use Shiva summon to increase the orb counter to 15 again, and this will allow you additional breathing room after summon has ended. Okay, when the orb is close to 5 and when Ultimecia has a EX fully charged like this, I think this is the best time to pop summon. Why? Because when Ultimecia gets 3 turns in a row inside summon, she will cap out the Lufenia orb counter all by herself, and getting the 3 turns back to back actually pushes the turn order, which will actually give you an additional few turns after summon has ended. Right, once summon has ended, you are out of ice attacks. So at this point, it's a DPS race to the finish. You need to kill off the bosses before the Lufenia orb ticks down to 0. But anyway, at this point in time, it's also very close to the 80 turns mark anyway. So if you can't kill them off in time, you will pass the 80 turns mark anyway. I didn't use either of Kefka or Ultimecia's burst. If you do have their burst weapons equipped, you should use their burst before you pop summon, so that you can have their burst effect in play during summon. And that's it. I hope this video has been helpful, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, do leave a like, comment or subscribe. It really helps a lot. Till then, I'll see you in the next Lufenia fight. Bye bye.